Hi, I'm Jonathan Santlofer. It's really great to see so many people here, and I see a lot of people I know. Okay, thank you to the Strand. Thank you to Touchstone Simon & Schuster. Thank you to the ACLU. I wanted to particularly thank Michelle Moore and Anthony Romero for just joining with us right away to do this amazing book. You know, it's really great to be here for something like It Occurs to Me That I Am America, which, by the way, is the last line of a great poem by Allen Ginsberg, because people keep saying to me, where did you get that long title? I'm having a little trouble here because I'm at that age where I really have to do this. You know, I've done many things in my life, and some I'm proud of. Others not so much. This book falls emphatically, you know, in the category of something I am proud that I did. The idea germinated over a weekend not long after the 2016 election. I want to take a minute, I only have 5, but I want to take a minute to say that this book would not have happened, would not have existed without associate publisher at Touchstone, Simon & Schuster, David Falk. Where's David? David, I don't have my glasses on. David is here. You know, David is that rare publisher, rare person who not only believed in this book, but worked on this book every step of the way to get it made. And as you can see, if you have it in your hand, made beautifully, really beautifully. And we chose the anniversary of the Women's March to have this book come out, and that meant we had 6 months to do the book, which was really scary. And David and I only had one fight. You know, I mean, it's kind of, it's like one of the best marriages ever. I want to thank also Susan Moldau and Shida Carr and Meredith and Isabel and the whole team at Touchstone. You know, there are several contributors here who will not be right here, but will be with you after to sign. But I'd like them all to just stand up, the contributors to this book right now, so you can see them. There will be other events at which these people will participate. This is really has been an honor for me to work with these people. It's just been extraordinary. You know, the concept behind the book was very simple: to gather artists and authors and artists and provide them with a platform to consider their ideas, thoughts, fears, anxiety, anything regarding civil liberties and freedom, whether it be about race, gender, class, sexual orientation, or simply what it means to be an American. I didn't ask for political essays. I didn't really want to contribute to that anymore. What I wanted was thought-provoking work that readers and viewers could, I don't know, feel something about, enjoy. And you know, nobody disappointed. I've done, as Lee Child was saying to me backstage, you've done a lot of anthologies. Well, this may be the last. But anyhow, every single piece in this book is good. I mean, it's really extraordinary. The stories are really diverse, from sad, mad, tender, moving, even laugh out loud funny. And you can see the artwork in the book is just fierce. Some of it's funny. It's all beautiful. You know, 50 people are in this book, 50 generous contributors, and I'm really, again, kind of honored and humbled to have worked with them. These are people, like I imagine most of you here, who value our country's rights and privileges, who believe in decency, in a freedom that was fought for, and a democracy that may be imperfect, but one we cherish and need to preserve. This book represents more than a collection of great prose and beautiful pictures. I've said this before, it represents hope. In a moment, you'll hear from Susan Herman, president of the ACLU. Why? Because every contributor in this book is donating their royalties to the ACLU, which means when you buy a book, or 2 or 3, you're giving your money to the ACLU. And if there was ever a time we needed them, that time is now. So after the book, Oh, after the book. After the talk, please buy your books and come. All of the contributors who stood up will be there to sign your book. So you'll also have, this amazing keepsake. And now I'm going to introduce President of the ACLU, Susan Herman. Susan?
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for providing the occasion and for providing the book. Now, I liked the title even before I knew it was by Allen Ginsberg, because it occurs to me that I Am America is so much to me evocative of what the ACLU is all about. So the ACLU was founded in 1920 by a very unlikely coalition of conscientious objectors and suffragists and progressives and communists and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And their main idea was that instead of starting an organization to defend my rights or the rights of people who I define as like me, our founder, Roger Baldwin, said the ACLU is to defend everybody. And I think that really is a perception that each and every one of us is America and entitled to liberty and justice for all. So the ACLU works in 14 different areas of civil rights and civil liberties. Now, I can tell you, unfortunately, so does the Trump administration. Unfortunately, just from the opposite direction. So people say to me, how was the ACLU able to be out of the gate so quickly and saying to Trump, we'll see you in court? And my answer is, we'd been practicing for 97 years. So, it's, for us, in some ways, this is business as usual. And in some ways, it's the fight of our lives. But the fact that we had been doing this work all along, defending civil rights and civil liberties, was how we were able so quickly to go into court and get the first injunction against the travel ban, how we've been able to get courts to defend the rights of 3 young refugee women to have abortions when the Office of Refugee Resettlement tried to prevent them from exercising their constitutional rights, these young 17-year-old women, one of whom had been raped. And why we have brought, since the inauguration, Jonathan, another figure, of course, is that it's just about a year since the inauguration. So in that year, the ACLU has brought against the Trump administration 133 lawsuits. That ranges from not just the things that I've mentioned, that ranges from the transgender military ban to the people who were beaten up during the protests at the inauguration, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the reason that we can do that is that we have been joined. We have over 1 million new members since the inauguration, and that is really, really big. So here's what's different for us. What we always had said to people in the past when they said, how can we help the ACLU? I've already sent money, what else can we do? What else can I do? Our answer was send more money. And then our staff is going to be able to do more work. But we've actually changed our tune because we've recognized, as Jonathan is saying, that we need a resistance in this country and we need hope and we need for everybody to be involved. So what we've gotten into for the first time ever is community organizing. So I hope that every one of you either is or is about to become a member of the ACLU, card carrying, if you like, or app carrying. And I also hope that you've also become familiar with our People Power program. That's our community organizing arm, where we are mobilizing people all across the country. So far, we've worked on immigrants' rights, and we now have a voting rights initiative in all the different states, where we have volunteers all getting together in house parties and then going out to their local whoever, the chief of police, the city council. So in Phoenix, they now have better immigration policies thanks to the People Power people in Arizona. We now have a major initiative going on in Florida to try to get re-enfranchisement for the over 1 million Floridians, mostly African-American men, who are not allowed to vote because they had been convicted of a felony. So it's a major initiative that we have going. So our idea is we have a lot of ideas, not just about what we're doing, but about what you can do joining us. So what I like about this book is that these are also people from beyond the ACLU staff, all having your own ideas about what you can do to partner with us and to amplify the voices speaking for American ideals. So I would like to just profoundly thank each and every one of you in the room, all the artists and the writers who are here and who contributed to the book, because through your activism, I think you've joined a critical resistance movement, which includes people marching in the streets, people demonstrating at the airports, and companies like Facebook, which held a telethon for the ACLU starring Tom Hanks and Tina Fey. And one of my favorite examples, an artist who happens to be a 13-year-old from the Upper West Side, who raised over $11,000 for the ACLU by doing everyday superhero caricatures on commission. So, we have a lot of people. It sort of reminds me of the end of Casablanca, where, Humphrey Bogart says to Claude Rains, "Welcome to the resistance. This time I'm sure our side will win." Well, we have a major resistance going, and I think that pooling our talents, all of us, the lawyers, the artists, the writers, everybody else, is the way that we can defeat Trumpism, which I would define as mean-spirited attempts to divide and demonize Americans based on something about who they are. And since you were quoting the end of an Allen Ginsberg poem, I think I want to close by quoting one of my favorite Langston Hughes poems. Do you know the poem, "Let America Be America Again"? Okay, if you don't, look it up because it's uncanny. It was written in the 1930s. Oh, excellent! I didn't get that far. I've been reading my way through. But what Langston Hughes says is he says to the people who say "Let America be America again," he has all these voices saying America never was America to me. And where he ends the poem is by saying, "Nevertheless, America will be." So thank you all for trying to make sure that that happens.
Thank you so much, Susan. If you look at the very last page of your book, the Langston Hughes quote is there. So let the dream of America be the dream of America. So I'm paraphrasing it myself, but you'll all have it in your book if you want to actually read it. So I would like everybody to come out. I almost said the contestants. Oh, those of you who know me, right? So, as you can, these are all people who have contributed to the anthology. What I did, everybody in the book is so accomplished that it took me a couple of hours to reduce these people's accomplishments and lives to about a sentence. So I'm going to do that now, I'm sorry to say. Angela Flournoy, on my left, is the author of The Turner House, a National Book Award finalist and a New York Times notable book of 2015. Her works appeared in the Paris Review, the New York Times, The Nation, and much more. Next to Angela. Next to Angela is James Hannaham, whose most recent novel, Delicious Food, sits on my coffee table. It won the PEN/Faulkner Award, the Morton Dowen Zabel Award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. He also exhibits text-based art, so he's sort of a double threat, right? Right. No? Michael Cunningham, right next to me, is the author of 6 novels, among them A Home at the End of the World and The Hours, both made into movies. The Hours won the Pulitzer Prize and the PEN/Faulkner Award. Right here is Susan Minot, is the author of Evening, Monkeys, also both made into movies. Am I right, or just Evening?
Monkeys, not yet.
Not yet. Okay, that's what we like to hear.
Coming.
Okay, along with several other award-winning novels and short stories. She also wrote the screenplay for Bernardo Bertolucci's Stealing Beauty, right? Right, okay. Next to Susan is Eric Fischl, one of the most acclaimed and influential American artists of his generation, and I think many generations. His startling and beautiful artwork, which I've always loved, is just about in any notable museum and collection you can think of, and we'll see a few of them tonight. So, Eric. So, on the far right is Lee Child. Oh, that's true. Yeah, that sounded all. Yeah, no. Lee has many personalities, but that's not one. Alt-right. Okay, alt-right. Okay. Well, Lee Child's is quite possibly the most popular and respected crime novelist of our time, admired by crime and literary writers alike. I will say that when I did do another anthology, Amy Hempel said to me, who is a literary writer, I will only be in it because Lee Child is in it. So, if you don't know who Jack Reacher is, I think you might want to check your pulse to make sure you've been alive in the last 20 years. So, Lee Child. So here's the thing. I've been given very little time. We're on a schedule. Very, very fast sort of schedule here. And so what I'm going to do is ask the first question, which has completely disappeared from my pocket. But in any case, I sort of know it, and I'd like to go through everyone and have them answer it. And we're going to do that a couple of times, and we're going to look at some work as well. So the question, which I think is a very basic question and a very obvious question, is why write? Why make art? Why do any of that, particularly at this moment in history? So could I start with you, Angela? Is that okay?
I knew that was going to happen if I sat here. So one thing that reading has taught me is that every moment in history has been pretty terrifying for somebody. And recently I've been reading a lot of Harlem Renaissance literature, and absolutely that moment in history in the 20s and the 30s, as exciting as that time was for those writers, it was also pretty terrifying for them, sort of outside of their little community. And if they hadn't written about it, I wouldn't even know that that was the case. So one reason that I write is to remind people, as hubristic as this might sound later, should anyone read me later, that that we survived it and that they'll survive it. That's what I read Black artists from past generations, that's what I'm reminded of, is our resiliency, and that it's not over until it is over.
Thank you, James.
Well, I'm slightly more pessimistic. It's not over yet. We don't know if we're going to survive it. I mean, some people in Hawaii earlier this week thought that they were not going to survive it, in fact. And I don't know, I live in a building that has a bank vault in the basement, and I'm constantly thinking now about, like, ooh, if something happens, I'll just run down to the bank vault. But what if I'm not at home? You know. But to attempt to answer the question, which is, I don't know, why do people even ask this question? I feel like it sort of goes without saying, and I love what, I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what Angela said. I think that, for me anyway, I like to feel that some of what I am doing is unique enough that it presents a viewpoint that many years from now, somebody can look back and say that happened, or that viewpoint existed, right? Because there are so many, I mean, people talk about this, you know, well, I'll just say it. I feel like, as somebody who opposes white supremacy, let's say, one of the ways that one can oppose white supremacy is to make your voice heard. As somebody who is, I mean, even as a white person, you can oppose white supremacy by making your voice heard. Who knew? I guess we all know that now. And I hope we don't forget it either. So that, I feel like that one of the ways writing and art reassert various identities is one of the most powerful things that it can do.
Wow, look at you all. We are really upset, aren't we? Look around the room. I'm going to keep this very short because I have a feeling there is kind of one answer to this question, and we're all going to bring variations on it. We need it now more than ever. Art is an act of witnessing. Art is a vital part of the historical record. And I know that I had a moment a year ago, last November, when I thought, yeah, right, who needs another novel? And then I picked myself up off the floor and said, we need it now more than ever before. And I think if we need any evidence of the validity of art, here we are. Look around the room. Point made.
I actually have a little bit of a different answer, but so I don't think we maybe all have the same answer. I think, you know, why art now? I would say art always. Why particularly now? Because the things that art gives us is a bridge to each other, more than, for me, the bearing witness I think I do in my writing is to try to communicate the struggle of being a person and having to deal with other people who are having their own struggle to deal with other people, including me. And I think that the sharing of sort of perspectives and stories in art, the vision that artists have is a way of bringing people, or at least bridging our experience with each other. And a thing that is happening now is that, you know, in different times and societies, there seem to be more connectivity. And now we see, which I'm not sure there really is, but now in a big way, we really see a lot of disconnection and a lot of hostility. So the reminder that each person has his or her own humanity, which I think people, once they get up close, and that's one thing that art does, is they get reminded and convinced of it.
I'm going to actually wait for Eric because Eric has his own moment, because he, as I said, he's our only visual artist up here, which means he has to represent every visual artist in the world. No, just every artist.
He'll definitely have something.
Oh, well, he will, but he's going to. I'm just going to save it. I'm going to skip to Lee there.
Why right now? I mean, that's a very tough question, really, because in a way I feel like a lot of what has been said is true. Leave a mark, bear witness, at least record what happened, or your version of it. And that historically is always how I've felt about art, is that it's a key somehow that you can unlock something with, or it can lead further down the road. But, you know, to be absolutely honest, I'm kind of depressed about it right now. You know, I feel like I've got the key, but somebody changed the lock and didn't tell me. You know, no longer does anything. Or the key is turned, it's now like a pipe cleaner or a piece of spaghetti. You know, it's just not, it doesn't seem to be in the same ballpark. I mean, we've got a guy in the White House who apparently, during the election campaign, paid $130,000 to a porn star to shut her up. Now, that has gone absolutely nowhere. I mean, that was in, the Washington Post the other day. It's just fallen into a pit of silence. So you've got specific things like that, huge outrages that at any other period of my life would have been enormous. It would have absolutely disqualified a person from the candidacy. So personally, I'm a little dispirited about what effect we can have. All I do myself personally is, because I write pulp genre books, and I try and have the guy do the decent thing and be an upstanding person, do the right thing. Because, you know, fortunately, I sell a lot of books, and some of them are read, believe it or not, by Trump supporters, and they love the guy because he appears to be this big, tough man. And yet I try and slip in all the time under the radar. I'm slipping in correctives. I'm saying, you know, if you want to be like Risha, then do what he does, and he does good things. But it's tough for me in general because I'm an immigrant, and in my story in this book, I tried a couple of elliptical things to point out. Americans are very reluctant to take criticism from immigrants. You know, like I'm somehow less of an acute observer. But I would say, actually, no, I'm more invested in America because I actually came here, you know, and it was a struggle. You got to go through a lot of hoops. You got to actually come here. It's a positive choice. The person criticizing me was born here and then sat on their fat ass and did nothing about it. So does that make them somehow more of an acute social observer than I am? Does it give their voice more validity than mine? Because they say, well, you've only just got here. Well, actually, I've been here 20 years. So does that mean that all their children who are less than 20, they're 18-year-olds, are they like worse Americans than me by that metric? It's a hard route to negotiate, especially because I come from a culture in Europe that is much older, and one of the characteristics of an older culture, like I've experienced, I've lived in Britain, I've lived in France, I know Europe very well, and the older cultures over there means, really the definition, I guess, of maturity means that you can look back to your country's past and you can say, yeah, we really fucked that up. Or we really screwed that up. Or that was a terrible thing to do. And most mature, in that technical sense, countries have that. That's part of their standard history syllabus. Yeah, this was a mistake. And anecdotally, I've found in America, even though my friends are the most immaculately liberal people, no question about it, there is a limit at which even the most liberal people still believe in this American exceptionalism that actually, no, there really can't have been anything wrong. That it must be some kind of a weird misjudgment, or it'll eventually be revealed to have been okay. And I've been taken aback a couple of times where, probably I'm high as a kite or something and we're having some bizarre conversation, but you say something that would seem to be an absolute fact or truth, and it is generally disparaged, even amongst extremely aware people. And everybody hates me for saying it because I'm only an immigrant, but this country eventually will grow up. And when it grows up, it will say, yeah, there's a lot of things we fucked up. And at that point, I think we make progress.
Well, I think it's nice that you said that we will grow up, because I think that was the hopeful statement in there, that we're still growing up and we have that time. And Lee brought up in the story that he wrote, and I wanted each of the people here, and I'm looking out at the other writers and artists who are in the book and thinking about the incredible diversity. I see Susan Isaacs here, who wrote a story that I laughed my ass off when I read. I just thought it was the funniest thing, but it also turns around so much. Or, S.J. Roseanne, who wrote a Holocaust story, which I had to take to my bed, but it's so beautiful and brings it to the moment, So everybody did something different. I'm looking for Anna Dunn, who I saw, who wrote who did something. First of all, she wrote it all in the second person. There she is. Okay, her friends are pointing her out. She wrote in the second person, which I always say to writing students, this is really tricky, I don't know if you can do it, but she does it beautifully. So what I'd like is for everyone, and I'm not ignoring Eric, it does feel like that, but he's gonna have his own time with his pictures up there, and he's gonna talk. And so I'd like everyone to talk about, 2 minutes about why they wrote what they wrote, what inspired them to write it, and what they felt about that piece in particular. I won't do it to Angela right away. I'll start actually just jumping and making Michael do it.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah. Oh, boo, 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 boo. I find that it is hard to decide what I feel most angry and upset about. The list is too long, and I don't have such broad powers of concentration. And I figure, well, there's 49 other writers and artists who will approach it in various ways. What I wrote is a sort of thinly veiled story about Guantanamo, a sort of hypothetical prison in which people are held, and they have no idea what they've done. So they don't know what to confess to. And as it happens, when they say, they think they've guessed it, they say, I'll confess, no one wants to hear it. They're just there. And I will just say that, oh God, it's a long list, but let's just take a minute about Guantanamo. which, like the payoff to the sex worker, feels a little sort of under-publicized. Those people are still there. Those people are still there without a trial, without anyone actually really looking at what got them there in the first place. Bush tried to close it down. Obama tried to close it down. Trump has now essentially said, no, it's fine like it is. Let's just keep those people there forever. And they're just there. It doesn't really matter whether they have committed, whether they're dangerous or not. And I suspect people who entered undangerous are plenty dangerous by now. That's it.
Well, the other thing about Michael's story is that because he made it non-specific, it becomes even more terrifying because it feels like any of us, anytime, without committing a crime and not knowing what that crime is. And I'm sure Susan Kreil, the artist, is here who contributed drawings. She's been doing political art for almost her entire life, and she has two drawings. One from, I think both are from Guantanamo, that she did in the book. But James, now why don't you speak about your story for a bit?
Well, I don't really want to spoil it. That story I plucked from my archive. It was part of a sort of messed up version of, like, what was it? It was supposed to be a collection of folk tales, sort of like messed up versions of folk tales. But at the time, I had been reading a bunch of books about for a class called Black Genocide and Resistance. And one of the books had an account of the way in which adoptions work in this country and how much more valued white children are than black children. So I thought, well, what if a black couple really, really wanted a white child? Like, what would they go through? How would they justify it, both to themselves and to their communities? And but then it just made me angry. And I guess that's all I should probably say.
I know, I don't think you should tell too much because I was gasping when I read your story. So I think everyone deserves to get their own gasp in. But we'll come back to, since I made Angela, yeah, why not? Please.
So the weekend after the election last year, I visited a university that I won't name in the South that I was there for like the whole weekend, and I found out within the last 4 hours of my being there that they have these slave cabins on campus, sort of like in a corner in the dark where no one can see them. And so I went to find them, kind of have to like hike there. And when I saw them, they had all of these like information placards, but it was a bunch of euphemistic language, kind of harkening back to what Lee was talking about, people in this country really not having the language to talk about this country. And so I really, at the time, being a person I also teach in universities, was just thinking, like, there's a committee that decided exactly what would and would not be included in relationship to these slave quarters. And so I decided to, at first I tried to write an essay about it. It wasn't good. That's just really just not the way that I process a lot of things, but it's not the way that I process something that I'm really angry or like upset about, or that I find really, really funny, and both things were happening. I thought it was just ridiculous, the kind of the tiptoeing around that was happening, and then also really infuriating. So I decided instead to write a story about, like, what is that committee and how are these decisions made? And that's basically what became the Miss April Houses.
When I received, one of the great things about doing an anthology is that every day people are sending you stories, original stories and artwork, and you just can't imagine it, but it's so wonderful. But Angela sent me this story, and I started reading it, and it felt very, very serious. And then I realized I was laughing, and then I thought, she's going to get fired. You know, I mean, she's taking on academia and they're in this particular language way, right?
I'm just a visiting.
Ah.
I visit is what I do. I visit.
Okay. No, you won't. You know, they wouldn't dare now after that story. Don't. We're all going to be there for you, Susan.
Yeah, my story is it's called Listen, and it's just a series of things that people say. So, I mean, Susan had asked me before, is it a poem? Is it a? It's actually more like something that could be a play for either two voices, or I think some people are going to be reading it Symphony Space as two voices, but it could be 20 voices. And I was just thinking after, you know, the tremor of the election last year, I started listening, as a writer does, to all the things people were saying. And it seemed like that was the, you know, people were marching and people were saying, well, what can we do? People were saying a lot of things, and they were saying a lot of things over and over and over again. And it was, you know, when people are traumatized, they like kind of repeat things. And so I started writing down all the things that people said, you know, like, I just can't believe it. Or, well, this was bound to happen. Or, well, who are they anyway? Well, they don't know who you are. And they, you know, all these sort of back and forth things from both sides. And sort of realize that people are saying things, but one of the things they're not saying is, wait, I want to figure out what the other person's saying. I mean, there's not a lot, like I said before, there's not a lot of bridges being built here. Even in sort of the outrage, it is a kind of people aren't reaching out to people. And that's part of the problem of things as they are. So perhaps if we think about what we're saying and what we're listening to, or maybe listen more than we're saying, it might be a help.
When I asked Susan if she would write something, she said, may I write a poem? And I said, no. And that is not because I'm against poetry at all. Some of my best friends are poets, but because Simon & Schuster and Touchstone and all of us had decided that we wanted a certain kind of story in the book. And so then I received Susan's and I thought, fuck, she sent me a poem. But in fact, I read it several times, and she mentioned Symphony Space, which is the 7th of February, I believe. Yeah, and there will be two actors doing a kind of call and response with your work. I mean, it should be an amazing night. But I realized, to me, it felt like a dialogue of things we say. We don't know what we're saying, how we're saying it, but
it's a piece of fiction. It's fiction.
Are we ignoring Eric?
Yeah.
All right.
I know. In a way, we're not even going to show the picture.
Okay. So my story, again, I'm an immigrant. I'm here voluntarily, which means that, I mean, fortunately I have a job that does not tie me into any specific location, so I could live anywhere in the world that I want, and I want to live here because compared to all the other countries in the world, this is the best. This, you know, I often wake up in the morning thinking, yeah, this is the best country in the world. And it really is for a lot of ways. I mean, in an odd, ironic way, the fact that we have the ACLU, and it has stuff it can do is a really good thing. Lots of countries don't have that. So yeah, this is the best country in the world. Some mornings I wake up thinking, this is the least worst country in the world, but still. But being a reality-based person who has not had, I guess, what must be a long, long indoctrination, it does make me impatient the way there are so many unexamined assumptions repeated endlessly, like, you know, the greatest democracy in the world, the oldest democracy in the world, blah, blah, blah. I was already in high school. Sergeant Pepper was in the charts before a black person could vote in a lot of this country without getting beaten to death. Now, that is 50 years ago. You know, that is not very old, and it is not very noble. And yet people keep saying it over and over again. So what I wanted to do in the story was the kind of thing where I use a true incident from the other thing that freaks me out, really, is that I use a true incident that took place just fractionally before I was born, almost in my lifetime, where a kid got lynched in Florida. Florida had more lynchings post-World War II than any other state. It was pretty rampant for about 10 years post-World War II. And I took a true incident where a mentally challenged kid was lynched in front of his father. And I imagine that this guy had a brother who had many, many years previously left and gone to play jazz in Paris. And the conflict, what I was thinking about, how do I feel about America, how do Americans feel about America, is this guy in Paris, even though it would undoubtedly increase his cultural status there, says nothing about what happened to his family, which seemed to me, I can't really figure out exactly why, but it seems to be something significant that happens. It's that bad things happen, we don't talk about it. We especially don't talk about it overseas. We keep it all secret within the family. And I think it should be talked about more. So, you know, my story was an attempt at just saying, hey, this shit happened. We should face it and we should talk about it.
Thank you. Eric, we're going to show some of, yes, I'm ready. Eric, you can be ready. We're going to show some of Eric Fischl's paintings that are in the book. You can see in the book. By the way, the book has things like this. I mean, can you believe that they did this? I mean, really? Jean Quick to See Smith, a Native American. No, she actually corrected me that she was an American Indian artist. So there's a lot of art in the book, but I want Eric to talk about his art, why he's doing the series that he's doing now. And as soon as it gets up there, Eric, take your, and just to talk about art in general in the way we've been discussing it.
Thank you. I was going to tell you that if I didn't get a chance to talk, I was never going to buy another book. Call me shallow. Anyway, as the visual artist on this panel of literary greats, I actually, as a painter, I kind of work in the opposite way of what I imagine writers do, which is that they seek to put words to experiences, and I try to paint back from words to experiences. And the difference being that I'm trying to create a feeling of an authentic moment that brings you in an experiential way that you then rush to form words to describe back to yourself what you're experiencing. And you know, to sort of continue a little bit of the conversation about why art now, why a particular kind of art now.
Excuse, can the first three pictures that were up were Eric's paintings?
Oh, I didn't
and if
know
you
we
could
were
start
flipping
it
through 'em.
again,
Yeah.
if you could start it again, I would just,
Actually,
I would
just
like to
stop
stop
on
for a
the
moment
first
on
one.
his.
Yeah.
And also you
No
could tell
offense,
the name.
Susan.
No, the name of your series is Late America, correct?
That's the name of
the one-
that painting.
That painting. Yeah.
That one's fine. Anyway, yes, the title of that painting is Late America, and I did a show that was named after that particular painting. It was also called Late America. Just to back up a little bit, I just wanted to say that one of the gifts that our artists have is that they are able to make order out of chaos. So when art is needed, it's needed at a time when chaos is its greatest. And right now is one of those times when we're all desperately trying to figure out on the deepest levels the meaningfulness of the moment. And for me, I don't really believe in political art. What I agree with Susan that really what I see is that it's about creating a believable experience that engenders empathy, and it's about connecting to others, and that's the fabric that we try to weave to create a society. And I think that's its highest purpose. I live in a moment where it's certainly very much like the moment you live in. The only difference for some of you is that my moment involves being a white male at a moment in which what a white male is or is supposed to be is under tremendous scrutiny and pressure, that there's a social shift taking place, a cultural shift, a power shift, et cetera, that is, and to combine that moment with the fact that I'm also an aging white male means that there's another strain taking place within my experience, which is one of a personal loss of power. At the same time, a social and political loss of power, et cetera. So the painting that is called Late America is a meditation on that aspect of being a white male at a moment when, from a child's point of view, there's a need to know. And from the male in this painting particularly, that they don't have an answer. And therefore it's, to me, profoundly tragic. And obviously this is a painting that also sets the drama between two white males, a young one and an older one, a failure of adult leadership set against a backdrop of privilege and a certain kind of social strata that is still very much a part of our world. So
could you talk a little bit about this? A third painting there, which is you said is your latest painting, which has the Trump clown picture on the wall. And I think you just finished that, right?
Yeah, that's my most recent painting. The Trump clown painting is, or picture is a caricature I drew on my iPad. And the situation is one in which obviously you're in a children's room. It appears to be a children's room because there are dolls scattered around, a certain kind of pastel tone to it that I associate with kids' rooms, etc. And then of course there's the sort of brightly colored, playful, costumed child in the picture. Both the child and the man in the picture's faces are averted, and what's watching you watch them are the dolls and the clown artwork, etc. That is the foil for it. And it seems to me to be a moment of profound worry. And again, it's something where you can't identify what they're worried about. It feels to me like they both turn towards the door or towards the black dress on the door there's an absence there, whether it's the female absence, the mother principle, et cetera, is absent. And then it's a thing of what is it exactly that's caught their attention that's apprehensive? And of course, we'll never know that. It's just the feeling is very present. So.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that Eric said at the beginning about being an artist is taking a chaotic world and making, sort of making this other world, making sense of it. And I think writers do it too, because they are certainly creating their own world. It's different. I always thought it's very different. I went to art school, so I know this, but you could see it all at once. So you could see what was wrong and what was right, as opposed to a story which you hold in your head and makes you go insane a little bit. But also, I was wrong when I did say that Eric was representing all the artists, because James Hannaham is also an artist as well as a writer. And there's quite a bit of art in the book, some that feels specifically political, some that feels not quite as political. You can see it being flashed up there. In there, there's a Roz Chast cartoon. I think Eric Fischl's paintings are right in the middle of the book, as it turns out. These are Shazia Sikander paintings that she chose specifically for this book. They're both double-page spreads. That's Shazia Sikander's as well. I kind of almost wish that we could see them so that everybody could comment about the art. And I also I know you might not want this, but I mean, I'm having a really good time listening to these people, so I kind of want to stay here for a long time, but no. But anyhow, Mimi Pond, who's a Los Angeles graphic novelist, who also is this amazing woman. She created the set with her husband for Pee-wee's Playhouse. She wrote the first episode of The Simpsons. Right there is Susan Kryle's Guantanamo images that are in the book. They're one of the few black and white images, and I'm glad they are black and white because they really hit you over the head. This is John Quick to See Smith, American Indian, and as I said, I showed you, she has a fold out in the middle of the, and I will say that she sent me an Indian blessing the other day, and I'm really excited about it. I mean, I've had holy water, but I never had an Indian blessing, so I'm very excited. This book is filled, as you can see, with the people here who are amazing kind of superstars and so talented. But we have, if you could you go back for 1 second? Because I also asked a couple of young people, like there's a young woman, Bridget Hawkins, who did that piece. It's 3 pages in the book, and it's about growing up biracial. And she was a student of mine at Pratt, and I thought she was so talented. And she talked about one day when, right after Trump was elected, and somebody, I don't remember what they said, but she burst into tears, and she said, "You have no idea what this means to me, how this affects me." And she started drawing that, and I asked her if she would put it in the book. So but would somebody else like to talk here just a little bit about anything to do with the book, or or anyone has a great question? Yeah, there we go. There we go. That's a way to keep me quiet. Someone? All you people? Yeah, that's all. You must have a question for one of these people or every one of these people. Really? There you go. Please, sir. Yeah, here. Yeah.
My question is, are there any topics that any of you thought about writing the book, but you just could not, for some reason, put it in the book? Whether you feel it's too emotional, too controversial, or something that you feel should not be part of the book? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone to take that? Anybody write? The question was, did anybody have a thought of writing something or making something that they felt was too controversial for the book?
I was looking for something that would be controversial.
And you did it. You know?
Can I just say something?
Sure.
One thing that strikes me is that why now does it seem like it's time for artists to come forward? You know, there weren't a lot of artists that came forward in the Vietnam War. There weren't a lot of artists that responded to 9/11, just to use two examples. Now it seems more and more that there's a sense of principled response or something that is coming where we're being looked at in a different way. And I'm just wondering, what is the difference between all of those life-changing experiences and this one?
Can anybody here want to take that a little bit?
I just disagree. I'm sort of nonplussed, so I can't really like go through a litany of like all the different artwork that has come out of all of those things you just mentioned. But like, absolutely, people were like, there was a guy in the towers who was making art about it before it even happened. Do you remember that guy?
Yeah, but I don't think that counts.
Doesn't, yeah, of course it doesn't count. But there were plenty of people. I mean, some of it was kind of bad, but I mean, and somewhat mawkish, right? But then what was the Falling Man piece? Wait.
Deborah Eisenberg's Twilight of the
That was you.
Superheroes.
What do you like? What?
Eric, do you want to take that?
somebody would say that.
Yeah, I'm afraid
So,
I
you're
disagree
just-
also. You know, Vietnam produced a lot of film-based resistance, if you want to call it that, and 9/11 certainly in the book world. S.J.
And
Rosen,
songs?
sitting there, right there, wrote one of the best post-9/11 books ever called Absent Friends. You know, there was a lot of good stuff coming out of those things. Now, I think the fear and panic is much more generalized, and so we're struggling to come up with a sufficient volume of response, possibly.
It's also only been a year.
Well, I wasn't saying that there was no art, no writing, no film, no whatever to any of those. But it seems that there's a sense now that, as you just said, that there needs to be an even greater, more broader response from the artists than there was in the past. I'm just wondering if there was a difference.
I think it's in general. Let me take that over. I think in general, people feel more active in responding. So, right, artists are just being thrown into the general group of people that are rattled, and it also seems like, you know, having Trump in the White House it's not just sort of one event. It's not one war. It seems like it's like about 10 things every day that is so outrageous. So I think everyone's sort of trying to sort of bring out all their energy.
I mean, also one of the things that happens in the production of art is that there's a lag time, right? I mean, you did this book in 6 months, which is unbelievably fast. Think about somebody who's writing a novel that's responding to these things. It's not going to come out until like 2 years from now. But there are more immediate sorts of artwork that have been coming out. I'm thinking of Kara Walker's exhibit. I'm a little biased there because she's my cousin, but but I thought that exhibit was a huge. Well, I won't say fuck you exactly, but it was. It was the exhibit she
The
did
artist
in.
statement was a fuck you.
Yes, that's true too.
What's kind of interesting about that, it being a fuck you, is how incredibly beautiful it was.
Well, she's
know?
always been doing that.
Right. You know, so beauty and horror is a really interesting kind of thing.
I mean, just the title of that one, Christ's Entry into Journalism. I just loved that.
There's a woman right here. Would you ask a question and then?
Hi, I'm visiting from Norway, so I guess I'm quite welcome here for the moment. Yeah, and I just want to say that I've been here for about a week and a half, and everybody I meet is expressing their concern and vulnerability in what you are sort of facing, and we feel for you. And if we had the vote, if we could vote in your elections, we would. We really, really would. But I'm also a student at Oxford, and I'm writing about postmodernism. So this is kind of like a nerdy question. Do you think that the art coming out now is sort of postmodernistic in the way that there's this search for unity and beauty and refinding truth? Do you feel any of that when you're creating now?
Somebody want to take the post.
I'll skip that right away. That's way above my pay grade.
I used to teach a class in postmodernism, but I'm still not going to take that.
I mean, one of the things about those sorts of labels is that they're not what artists are not coming up with those things. Like academics are putting those labels on people way after the fact. Artists, to my knowledge, are just doing stuff, and if it's any good, it will have some kind of resonance to the present moment.
I agree, but I also think that is why there are academics as well as artists.
I'm not saying there shouldn't be.
No,
academics.
we're not. God forbid, we're not disagreeing. But I'm piggybacking on the because I find that I don't really know what I'm doing, in a larger sense. I'm just doing the best I can with what's in front of me, and then people will talk. Sometimes, if I'm lucky, talk to me about what I did, and I'm like, oh, really? Yeah, that makes sense. But I'm
and trying to do something that no one has done before on some level, right? Or that even you have not done before.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think we're often part of a bigger picture than we have any idea about, if we're lucky.
Yeah, but I think there may be, I don't even know what postmodernism is, but I imagine, you maybe are looking at the elements that are a sort of reaction to what has been sort of more accepted in what's going on. So maybe now, I don't know if the search for beauty is like something no one's been doing for a while, or a kind of earnestness, perhaps. There's been a sort of jadedness maybe in literature that an impatience for earnestness, but because earnestness is hard to do and have it be good art. But maybe, there's a feeling of a need for that because everything out there is so, chaotic and disturbing.
In the visual arts, to make a gross generalization, you see a lot of work that is, it doesn't matter stylistically whether it's figurative or abstract or even performance-based or whatever. It deals with a level of finish, a level of completion, and a process that is or certainly borders on obsessive behavior. It's something and it's also something that has an intelligence, expresses an intelligence about it, but not an emotional connection to something. So I don't know how that fits into the the discussion we're having, but it's something that. Yeah, it's a way of controlling something that is out of control. Yeah.
Well, I go back to that thing of artists trying to somehow distill chaos, and I go back to myself as a little boy trying to do that, by drawing. So I think maybe this is somewhat of a unifying factor among people who make things in this way, that they are trying to reorder the world in some way, or challenge the world, or put something out there in the world. And I think it was interesting that James brought up Kara Walker's show. I don't know how many of you saw it, but it was a spectacular show. And I walked in and I thought it was so beautiful. And then I started reading it and thinking about it, and and it had this other which of course took it beyond the kind of beauty that, maybe beauty's never quite enough. So I think we've gone over our time, though, right?
I was going to say we have time for one small question from the
or
audience.
a big question, or like a question that everybody
Jonathan,
can
just
answer.
let me say, in terms of
So
response,
if you'd like to select someone.
in terms of response, I think the response in this book is fantastic. In as much
Yes,
as
that woman over there who happens to be my sister.
Okay, here.
Oh, I'm sorry, I guess you don't hear me, which is probably a good thing. I would love to hear more from you. And younger, there's a divide here between, I'm sorry, I'm old too, so you guys are a little old. There Angela is young, and I would love to hear more from you.
You said because I haven't known many presidents.
Well, I mean, Trump,
Um,
Obama, yes. But
well,
how does the world feel to you right now as
so-
a young person?
what does it feel like, you said?
Yeah, I think there's more hope with older people. We've seen some things that we've overcome, etc. You're very young, right? And
Ish. Yes. So right. So I'm from Los Angeles. I was born during the Reagan years in Los Angeles, which was a city hit hard by the crack epidemic. My father's from Detroit, which is another city hit hard by crack epidemic and heroin epidemic before that. And so I sort of didn't grow up thinking that America was sort of once great. I've always been a student of history and also just being enthusiastic about literature. You read books, you realize that nothing has ever been the way that people like to kind of and look back in things with like this view of nostalgia as everything having been perfect at one time. Certainly not for people of color or queer people in this country. And so for me, the way that I feel is not very surprised, unfortunately, about a lot of things, but certainly after the election, not very surprised, but I do feel also not like complacent. So I would say that the way that I feel is that being a student of all these other periods of times and what was sort of required of the writers of those periods in time, I think about like somebody like James Baldwin or somebody like Toni Morrison, being one of the few Black editors at the time in the late 60s, early 70s, still thinking it was important to put together an anthology of Black art and to celebrate Black resistance through the arts. I just remind myself that it's not sweet for me now, and so that those sorts of things are still necessary, and that that it's really important. And I try to impress this upon my peers. It's really important to think about history and to think about things in terms of cycles and patterns and how do we get out of them. And one way we get out of them is by reminding ourselves that we've been there before, which again goes back to what Lee said in the beginning, which is about having a memory that's longer than like the past 8 years, which were not great. Guantanamo was still up and running during the last 8 years. It's better than what we have now, but it wasn't perfect. So that is what the young people, I suppose, think. I don't know.
All right. I was going to ask everybody for a closing remark about what they were. My burning question was why you said yes to me, because not everybody did say yes to me. And, maybe there's if you could answer that and say what struck you about when I asked you to participate in this.
Probably just caught me on a very angry day. I probably could look at the day that the email came in and what was on the news, and I was just like, yes, gonna do it, yeah.
I'm glad it came on that day.
Well, you're my colleague. I have to see you on campus. So I figured I better, if I could find something, I would do it.
That was good. That was smart.
A quick thank you to the gentleman who suggested that it's possible to write something that's too controversial, that's actually dangerous, or to paint something that's too controversial or too dangerous. God, I hope that's true. And to be asked to contribute to a book that might conceivably be controversial and dangerous. Why in the world would you say anything but yes?
I think that after Trump was elected, I decided that anytime someone asked me to do something as Susan said, on behalf of kind of resistance or an expression, something that could express the dismay, that I was going to say yes.
I will do anything to further my career.
I will do any.
I just want to say that Eric doesn't need to do anything to further his career, but okay.
I did it for 3 reasons. Number one, I do whatever Jonathan tells me to do.
That is good news for me.
Number two, it was a way, the only chance in my entire life probably, that I will be in a book on a title page alphabetically next to Roz Chast, who is one of my favorite cartoonists of all time. And number three, I was just proud that you would want me as part of the response. And I'm very, very honored to be in there. But I do have to say, I think one of the most impressive responses we've heard was from Susan, 1 million new members. You know, people are feeling the same everywhere.
Thank you, everyone. You know, I thought just the other day that this book wouldn't have existed had we not had this crisis. So, you know, I don't know if I am happy about that, but I'm happy to have the book. And thank you all for coming. Buy a book. There are 12 or 14 writers and artists here that you can get to sign. All royalties will benefit the ACLU, so it's a way for you to give money to the ACLU. And I thank you. And the writer.